So we're back with a Sunday morning and another database version 1.8. It's been around a month since my last one, so hopefully quite a good bit to go through today and everyone gets something out of this and it's enjoyable, not too boring. Quickly, I want to just mention that if you are a Patron supporter, please do send me your questions, queries about technology, gaming, anything to do with anything, and if I can answer it, I will, and that's important just to keep this kind of benefit to Patreon supporters and obviously give you a little bit more on this channel and this video as well. So just want to get that out there just in case you haven't had a chance. Please do join and ask me a question as needed. Anyway, first up, Forza Horizon 5. So Microsoft have come out with an update, unsurprisingly to time with the launch of a big game from Sony next week. So November 8th we get an update for Forza Horizon 5. It's in two camps yet again. If you are a PC player, then you're going to have a big smiley face. If you're an Xbox player only, then you're not, because this is again only one available for PC players and not console players, which is a shame because the whole point of the Series X was it is a ray tracing capable console, and Forza Horizon has that available currently in its Forza Vista mode, so the photo mode effectively, or at least inside the car view. They've now taken what was modded very early on in the game's launch and added it to the console, or sorry, to the PC version only. So if you have a PC capable of running ray tracing and the specs are quite high and demanding as you would expect, you now confusingly have two of the modes, Ultra and Extreme, which are actually just medium and high from before, but whereas before they're only available in that Forza Vista mode, they're now available in the gameplay and or photo mode. That just means you get half resolution at the old medium is now Ultra, and then the full resolution ray trace reflections, which was the old high, is now the Extreme. So yeah, they've put this graph together to make it even more complicated. But effectively, you're sitting here looking at the specs you need to run this, and they're pretty high. So to run it at the ideal settings, you need a 6800 XT, or you need an RTX 3080, and again, a very demanding CPU there, so you're going to need something pretty decent to run this by the looks of things. I'll be checking it out on the channel and having a quick dive into that very early next week, so do stay tuned. Fingers crossed this continues a trend where Microsoft, if they don't get games out, they give some updates and patches to titles that are already out so that there's some benefit. But seriously, Microsoft, give console players something, because after all, that's where you started. Obviously, the reason here is because it needs FSR to run a decent liquid ray tracing on. That makes sense. The Xbox is fully capable of running FSR 2.0. It's already in the SDK, it's been in there for a while, and actually Scorn uses it. I've recently started playing that title, so it's a shame they couldn't do it. Even if that had to run the game at FSR 1080p, it would still at least give Series X owners, but again, it's all about the marketing, the power of the console and all that, so maybe just ends up making the console look worse, but it is either or a shame that it's not been added in there for players. But it will be demanding for PC players, as we see here, with it requiring FSR 2.0 or DLSS, and I'll be interested to see just how it runs in terms of the ray tracing elements on my RTX 2000 card and obviously my RX6800 ahead of the next launch of cards coming soon. And I'm sure it's built on the back of all the updates that are coming in the next Forza Motorsport title, which has got ray tracing. It was one of the most impressive titles that Xbox showed off earlier this year when they did the whole deep dive into their ray tracing and dynamic light settings in their new game. So I'm looking forward to seeing what comes of this version, whether or not the ray tracing is better than it was in the Forza Vista mode and how it actually runs like in the game. I know there's been mods on this already that have added this back in, so it's not as if it's a huge update to the title itself in terms of possibilities, but at least they're spending a little bit of time and obviously are aware that there's a little bit of negativity around Xbox and their lack of titles. I mean, let's be honest, how many times does Phil tell us that he hears loud and clear that there's no games and then nothing comes for another year? So anyway, hopefully this is a good update and I'll be covering it later on the channel. So next up is PlayStation VR2 finally gets its announced release price and date. As expected, end of the quarter for this year, so February next year, for $599, £529, sorry, $549, £529, €599. So I'm sure many people will find that more expensive than they probably hoped for, including myself. I think their target for it was going to be around $449, $499. I thought that's where they'd target. But again, they've put the price up of the console. Everyone's in inflation. There's recession across the world. This is a premium product. It isn't going to be something that everyone's going to jump in and buy. It's going to have legs, obviously. They're not going to try and smash this out of the park on day one. And VR is still, as much as it's getting more popular, it's still something that's niche compared to the mainstream gaming area. But as I've already covered multiple times, all my VR titles over the years, I love VR. You know, I bought PC VR, I play on PC, I play on console. I'm looking forward to VR2. I've already got my pre-order in, so I'm hopefully, or my request to get a chance to pre-order. So fingers crossed I'll be able to snag one and obviously cover it in depth on the channel. And I'm looking forward to playing more VR. I mean, you've obviously seen, or we may have not have seen, but over on IGN, Bo covered it with a hands-on session, and, you know, generally he had good feedback on the actual headset itself. He played things like Resident Evil, which I hope they'll do more of, which is add a proper VR mode into full fat games, so you can play the same game in VR with all the additional benefits that this offers. So the adaptive triggers, the haptic feedback, the 3D audio. But let's talk on the price for a minute. Obviously, it's going to make people, you know, get a bit twitchy, and I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of people that aren't happy with it, and I agree, it's pretty expensive. It was always going to be expensive. We've already seen that Oculus put their price up because of the cost of VR headsets, and obviously they're trying to recoup the money in the headset and not make it a loss leader. VR isn't really going to work out as a loss leader, I think. It's not like consoles. It's not subsidised at that level with people buying subscriptions and everything else. That's all fitted into the PlayStation 5 model, the Xbox model. So this is something where Sony have to make profit from day one. And that's obviously been impacted heavily by the recession, by everywhere and every country being affected. Again, as I've covered before, they're a Japanese company, so they're going to be affected more with the yen and the pound. But it's going to definitely hit some people hard, and they're going to find that expensive and hard to justify. I'm pretty sure they would have wanted to launch in Christmas because they're going to miss a good sales opportunity there for people buying this for their partners, their loved ones, or just for themselves as a Christmas present. But then a lot of people will probably just wait and hold off for their Christmas presents and use it to put towards this or buy it outright. You do get a pair of headphones in there. I'm assuming they're going to be those little push-in earbud ones, so it probably won't be as good as using the full 3D audio headset, the Pulse, the 3D Pulse that I've got, or something like that. So that's what I'll be using. So long as they're comfortable to wear with the headset, I'm looking forward to giving it a try. And again, it's the specifications of the PSVR2 that really impressed me. You know, it's got the opportunity here to be the most premium headset on the market, give or take. Certainly with an OLED screen, you know, 90 to 120 Hertz, making it one of the fastest, and it's 4K, 2K per eye. But as I predicted way back when, that's what they're going to deliver, and that means it's going to have incredibly good clarity and sharpness. We've already seen that in some of the previews, as mentioned. The fact that it's OLED gives really good deep blacks, and that will help with the screen. You won't get any of that screen door effect. But again, as I said before, headsets, it's not just about the screen, it's about the optics, and that's where I really want to check out what Sony have done, how they've improved it, and the eye tracking, so that pervasive rendering will really help in terms of the clarity in your eyes where you're looking, so the peripheral vision will be a lower resolution. And this is similar to what I covered way back with Resident Evil 7 in terms of a software solution. So that is really going to help out in terms of using the power of the PS5 to deliver quality that is up there or equal to what you're playing in 2D and 3D in the headset. So that's a big benefit for this, and I'm looking forward to, you know, testing that out, trying it out, and seeing what the quality looks like. The fact that it's got haptic feedback as well on the headset itself, so you're getting this active head bobbling around when you're in the game, that will really help, and that will help for travel and, you know, motorcycle games and car games, all of that. That kind of head buffering will help the sickness levels, I think, for many people. So I'm looking forward to them using that more and more. Again, it's all around the games there. We've got to be clear, it's all around the games. And again, there's like 11 games that they've announced, and there's some good ones there, like Crossfire and Firewall. Ultra looks incredible, one of my favourite games on the original PSVR. Obviously got Horizon and many others. Switchback, again, there are some filler games here, absolutely, we've got to be clear on that. But they've got to get titles out first, and obviously there'll be a lot of teams working on multiple games, smaller independent deliveries and small deliveries that can be done by smaller teams, as I mentioned before. So, and I've got a good feeling, hopefully, that London Soho Studios, the team that made Blood and Truth, one of their favourite titles in terms of utilising the PSVR and the PS4 Pro as well, to improve the quality quite significantly, which I covered on the review on my channel when it came out. I'm hoping that they can go back and make, finally, the Getaway. The Getaway in PSVR 2 would be incredible. Having the open world, the city to drive around, even if it's just a remaster of the first game or the second game or a combination thereof, I think that would be incredible. And I really am hopeful that that's something that the team are working on. I know they're working on games at the moment, so that's fingers crossed that is an option that comes from them. I know they've got Firesprite working on stuff as well, and they worked with Gorilla on Horizon Call of the Mountain. So there's definitely a lot of stuff there, but they need more third parties to jump in. Teams making VR modes, and Sony are going to have to subsidise that, I'm sure, at the start. But hopefully we get more and more titles that push it. You know, new Star Wars titles, anything with space. We've still got No Man's Sky, which is probably the most travelled game ever. It's already got a PSVR version. Another thing to touch on is the fact that this won't support, and they did call us out early on, and it makes sense because it's all about backwards compatibility. If you allow a new headset to play older games, there might be limitations or issues with how they track. Remember, this is tracking completely differently. It's got inside-outside tracking, it's got a camera system, it's got a transparent view. There's a lot of functionality there that, you know, just wouldn't work very well with the older headset, so they've made the decision not to do it. It's not perfect, absolutely, but if they do make titles quickly for this, I don't think you'll want to go back to the old games anyway, because they just won't visually look as good as what the headset can deliver. So you've got to look forward when you're buying a VR headset, and again, it will be good that if this catches on, Sony then make future headsets backwards compatible so that games don't get lost if they move generations again. So that'll be a good part. But again, there's a lot here to discuss. We've only got a few more months till it comes out, and I will be covering it in detail more and more. And fingers crossed, there'll be more games being announced soon. Again, I know everyone talks about things like Half-Life Alyx, which is an incredible game, absolutely. It's one of the standout titles in VR. If you ever get a chance to play it, do play it. The chance of Valve giving that up is pretty slim in my opinion. It could happen, I don't see it, but we'll have to wait and see. I hope I'm wrong. But again, there's other titles that they could use, like Boneworks, which is a great title. There's other games they could use in VR that would be good on this platform early on. So I hope Sony work hard to get some of the big hitters from PC over to it. There's that medieval slasher, which is really good fun. It's probably a bit too gory, but it's a great title to play. So there's a lot of stuff here that they could probably add in to an early launch just to entice more and more people to buy it. I'm certainly going to be one of those people, and I'll be covering it very soon on the channel. So next up we have the update for AMD and their new RX7000 cards. So the announcement, the price was incredible, so really happy. They did, you know, what I thought they wouldn't do. I did think they'd come out and bump the price up, but they haven't. They've come out and come back in $100 less than the previous release of the 6900 XT. So Nvidia said things aren't getting cheaper, but AMD begged to differ. I think it's great. I think AMD know where they're going to go. They know that they're not going to go for bleeding edge. That said, we'll touch on performance specs in a minute. Ray tracing, I've said this before, I never expected they'd get close to Nvidia's ray tracing capability. They're just not there yet. It's going to take them a while to catch back up. And in fact, even Intel, I think Intel have done a great kickoff in terms of ray tracing quality. But it's all about the balance. So Intel's cards are very good, but they're operating at a mid-level. So they're somewhere between, I think, the RTX 3060 and the RX 6600, there or thereabouts, that level that they're kicking around at. But in terms of ray tracing, they're probably as good as the 2000 cards from Nvidia, if not close to the 3000 cards. So that's a good start from Intel, and I think AMD need to work hard on improving their ray tracing capabilities. That said, this is still going to be potentially between 50 to 80% better performance than the current 6000 cards in ray tracing. I still think they're holding back here. I think they're playing their cards close to their chest. The clocks don't make sense to me. The clocks seem like they're doing in Nvidia by saying that this is the game clocks, but actually it boosts beyond that. Architecture-wise, a lot of information has said it's architected to run at 3 gigahertz. The fact that they've gone to chiplets says that they're doing that to keep the performance levels where needed. So 5 nanometer on the GPU itself and 6 nanometer for the memory allocation. The bandwidth is incredible. And that really means that they're going to swamp it. It's got their cache, their Infinity cache on there as well, so performance will be great in terms of bandwidth-heavy titles and cache-heavy titles. So I think beyond the specs, 61 teraflops and all that's relevant. Looking at the specs, if we look at ray tracing, I think it's going to fall somewhere between an RTX 3080 and an RTX 3090 Ti level of ray tracing performance at the same visual settings and quality, not factoring in anything else. And that means that that's where it's going to compete at the ray tracing level and the rasterization level, and it's arguably cheaper even now than a 3090. But you got to factor in, everyone uses DLSS, everyone's going to be using FSR 2.0. They've obviously brought out FSR 3.0 as well, so there's a lot of legs on that. Need to know more and more about that, and we'll cover that at a later date. But again, a lot of what they're doing here is they're making sure their foot is in the door. The thing that everyone's going to miss is the 4090 is like 60-70% more expensive based on MSRP, which you're never going to get, so the aftermarket cards are going to be more. It's not competing with the 4090, it just isn't. And AMD know that, and Nvidia knew that, and that's why they've done it. I've said this before in my previous video, before when they announced it. What they're doing is they're selling a premium card at a huge amount of margin to make sure that they get what they need to get, knowing that they're not going to sell many 40 cards. They're going to push out what they've got in stock for the 3000 cards. The problem is for NVIDIA, because AMD know that as well. And that's what this card is showing. This card is showing that they're going after both ends of the spectrum. So they're going to kill the 3000 series in terms of, what do I buy now? Do I go and buy a cheaper 3000 card? They're going to have to cut the margins on them to get the prices back down, because if you can pick up a 3080 or a 3090, that's great. You're going to get better ray tracing performance than even this top-end card, absolutely, but not to a meaningful degree, because you're not going to be running that card at 4K at 60 FPS at ray tracing on. You're just not. So DLSS is going to come into it. FSR is getting more and more traction, but most importantly, the price will be almost the same, but the rasterization performance on this card will kill all of the 3080 cards, all of them, 3090 Ti as well. This is going to be around, well, their rasterization levels, they're saying 50%, 70%. So if we look at that as a test, we've used TechSpot, and they've got their average against 1440p and 4K. So if we look at a 13 game average with a 1490, then it comes out with an average frame rate of 214 FPS versus 152. That's at 1440p. So what that actually means, you break it down, if we take the 13 game raster average, so here if we say that the average is going to be 50%, let's say it's worst case scenario, so 50% faster than a 6950 XT, so that's 228 average at 1440p. That's around 6% faster than the current 4090, the champion. Yeah, if it's 55, well, if it's 60%, then it's 13.6% on average faster than those games tested at 1440p. If it's 50% faster at 4K, then it's around 11% slower than the 4090, and that's what you would expect, because the 4090 is faster at 4K, because that's really what it's designed for. Remember, no DLSS here, this is just straight raster performance. But if that was 60%, then it's only 5% slower. But if we are a bit conservative and we keep it at 55%, so we say both of them are 55%, that means at 1440p on these particular games tested, it's around 10% faster than the 4090, and at 4K it's around 8% slower. So that's give or take 10% within touching distance of the 4090, and it's 60% cheaper. That's bonkers. As I say, when it comes to ray tracing, though, it's more like a 3080, 3090, and that means using the same ballpark of 55%. Then at 1440p, this is Tom's Hardware here, 6 game average at RT. Again, this is where no DLSS is turned on, no FSR, it's just straight flat. With a 6950 XT getting an average of 39.8 at 1440p, the 4090 gets 103. So even at 55% increase, again, the best part of what they're quoting, that's 40% slower than a 4090. So that's still right around that 3080, 3090 raster performance. It's still good, but it's not going to get anywhere near the 4090, as we know. And you're not even factoring in DLSS and all that kind of stuff here. But at 4K, it actually gets worse. It's 46%. And if you look at that, that's kind of where their pricing is, because they're, give or take, around 40-50% cheaper, but they're around 40-50% slower in ray tracing. But this isn't going to be as it looks. This is worst case scenario. So raster, you're about thereabouts, and in ray tracing, you're behind. But you're going to be saving a hell of a lot of money. You're talking $1,000 or £1,000 versus $1,600 if you can get a 4090. And a 4080 is still going to be 1,200 quid. So you're still talking £200 difference there. The difference isn't as big, admittedly, but these figures won't be the same. The 4080 could be 15% slower than the 4090. It could be in both areas. So raster's going to go up. That means it's never going to be negative to the 4080. It's always going to be above it or thereabouts. And rasterization and in ray tracing performance, it's going to actually be even better. Sorry about that. I didn't put RT, did I? So, yeah, I mean, at this point, you're looking somewhere around 10% or 20% price difference between the 7900 XT and the 4080. There's 20% there. Rasterization means that the new card, the AMD 7900 XTX, oh my god, these names, that's going to be at least 10, maybe 15% faster than the 4080. That means you're going to end up with a card that's 20% cheaper and potentially 10% to 15% faster. That's crazy. Yes, it's going to lose out in ray tracing, but if more and more titles will pick up FSR and they'll start using that along with DLSS, you're still going to get the choice of saying, I can run this game at 4K FSR quality or performance, getting very close to the same quality and visual output that I'm getting on my NVIDIA card, and I might be at 60 FPS, and that NVIDIA card might be at 72. Who cares? It's not a big enough difference. If you care about numbers, yes, but not in gameplay. It doesn't make that much difference. And that's where I think this card will come to the fore. And you've got to factor in, there's going to be titles, again, that start using the AMD in terms of the ray tracing technology it's in use. There might end up being sponsored titles that use ray tracing. So there might be games that get closer to that 40-50% gap. And they're never going to catch it, they're never going to beat it. But there might be games, big games, especially if Sony start porting some of their titles over, you might see things like the new Spider-Man running very, very well on this card because it's designed around the ray tracing performance that the AMD cards deliver. And this is just amplified in the RDNA 3. So there's that. There's the fact that you're getting minimum of 20 gigabytes, even if you buy the cheaper, £100 cheaper model in the 7900 XT, but you're getting 24 gigabytes, which is significantly more than what you're going to get in that 16 gigabyte 4080. I'm not saying that's going to make you VRAM bound, but there's definitely going to be situations where you are, and that 4070 at 12 gigabyte makes no sense at all because it's just going to be GPU bound all day, every day. I've already shown on many of my games and tests that the RTX 2070 8 gig is heavily, currently, at lower resolutions, GPU and VRAM bound a lot because of the games running modern outputs such as Uncharted and Spider-Man. So you're going to have to use more and more of that GPU power and the VRAM allocation, which means you need more. And 24 gig is more than enough, over the top in fact, whereas 16 gig is borderline just what you need. And that, again, is another factor you need to factor in. But more importantly, it's got DisplayPort 2.1, and the 4090 still only got 1.4, so you can't even hit the frame rates that you've got for the screens that a lot of people buy in PC. So that is also something to factor in. There's a lot here to discuss, and I think that what AMD have shown is very, very good. It's a very good start. Their ray tracing performance is close enough for me to still be competitive, and if you're still competing around a 3080, 3090 in terms of ray tracing, that's not bad. And that's where they're going to sit based on, what they've told us in their outputs. But we have to take all that with a pinch of salt. This is just forecasting. But again, I forecasted what the 4090 would be like. It wouldn't be anywhere near the 2 times they quoted. And hey, I was bang on with that. But sometimes you can read between the lines, and here, proof is in the pudding. AMD need to deliver on this, and the benchmarks on the reviews need to prove that this is what they're doing, and obviously need to get it to market. So next we have disk, DRM and digital distribution. Again, the DRM and reduced ownership plight continues, and I get bored of saying this, but I think we need to keep doing it. I mean, as per 2020's Cold War release for the PS5 and Series X, Series S players at least, the disk release was just the DRM access key. On the Xbox, you could even buy a version that wouldn't let you download the Smart Access version, which I did myself, actually. I didn't check ahead of the box. It actually said Series X and Xbox One and stuff. So, again, Activision kind of want to take the award for this, I think. So, in the latest release, which I'm covering at the moment, it's 70 megabytes on disk. That's it. And in addition to that, so you've got nothing on it. The disk is pointless. It's just an access key. They might as well just give you a code that you type in, save everyone all the hassle and deduct, 5-8 quid from the charge. But in addition to that, it states you can split the download so you can play the game faster. So as you can see here, 39 gigabyte for the full game and then split chapters for single player. It doesn't work. You can't get it to work. You still have to wait for the whole thing to download anyway. And even then you end up having to download multiplayer, even though you say it not to. And then it gets worse. So then they have this option to stream textures. And that can be up to 24 gigabytes additional space needed on your hard drive, over and above that 39 gig. So if you go from the beginning to end, you start off saying it's 70 meg on the disk. You need 39 gigabytes to kick the single player off, and that ends up being around 110 gigabytes. That could be 130, 140, and it will be, because I had COD and Warzone on the old disk, taking up almost 250 gigabytes of my hard disk at one point. And that's likely because they were streaming textures, changing assets, and downloading data dynamically in the game, but not cleaning out the old stuff. So you end up with this huge repository of data on your hard drive that's just full of crap you don't use. The game itself is very baked. It always has been. So much of the visual quality, and the reason why people are cooing about the Amsterdam level, is because of the baked light in it. The shadows, the details, all that kind of area is now baked into the textures themselves. And now, because of next-gen consoles, or now-gen, they ship much of that as a next-gen update, which you download, before you play, as I've just covered. But on top of that, the teams are still working on it. So it brings a whole new meaning to iterative development, as the team are still making updated textures and assets, which you need to make it look more next-gen. Talk about a UAT loop without the feedback loop. It's just terrible. This needs to stop. So, I mean, it's really, really silly. And the worst of it is is allegedly this is the best COD they've had for years. Again, it's a remake, it's a remaster, so it's getting older people going back to play games that played Modern Warfare 2. And, you know, generally, it's still a good title in that sense. It hasn't moved on at all. Single player is the same old single player canned kind of routine that you work through, but it's got some good spectacle. But it's selling so well. Was it 10 billion sales in a week or 3 days? So, again, everything we do and say here and other channels and other, you know, accounts on Twitter and stuff, such as Does Not Play, all of that means that you're just a fire in a hurricane at this point, because everyone else just keeps buying this game and they're getting away with it. They're shipping nothing more than a coaster of a disc. There's nothing on it. And you download everything and, you know, fill up your hard drive over a period of time. And all of a sudden, the game that you bought that should take up 60 gigabytes is taking up 250 gigabytes, maybe more. And that's a big problem with, you know, a cost of SSD, space and compression and all that kind of good stuff. So it's a real shame, and I really do hope it stops. Rant off. Okay, so the next section is a new one I've added in, games I'm playing or have been playing at the moment. So Scorn, literally downloaded that before it came out on the Xbox, just started and kicked it off. Very striking game, obviously designed around Alien and HR Giga and the whole organic mixture of human and machinery. All of that looks great and it's very impressive. I'm really impressed with visually what it's done so far. It's a bit slow, so I'm hoping that it picks up a little bit, or at least the puzzles become more involved, but quite impressed with it so far. It's very slow paced, it's got an old school feel, and it doesn't give you any prompts and tips, just throws you in and you got to figure it out. So I like that. I like games like that. It's always good. So yeah, enjoying that at the moment. That's very good. Return to Monkey Island, been playing that for a while. Love the original, one of my favourite games of all time. In fact, I was into such the old games on the Amiga anyway, as people know. So the games like Loom, Monkey Island, Jack McCracken, all of them. Jack McCracken. Maniac Mansion, Day of the Tentacle, Fate of Atlantis, Monkey Island 2, I think are two of the best ever made in terms of overall quality, comedy. I mean, that was quite rare back then. Games to be funny. The new one is, it's a bit slow and it's too self-referencing. It's a little bit too self-aware at the moment. So I'm not saying I'm loving it. I'm saying it's good, but hopefully it picks up a little bit. I'm about 3-4 hours in. In terms of the puzzles, they're too easy at the moment. It doesn't really give you much of a challenge. And Scorn's a little bit like that, but I hope both of them do pick up. If it continues at this level, it will not replace any of those two for my favourite of the Monkey Island series. And then retro titles, I do tend to play. So I've been playing quite a bit of Mortal Kombat, which kind of fits into the stuff that I've done in my recent retro, which went public today or yesterday. So that's one around the look back on Mortal Kombat, its inspirations, its motivations, what kind of inspired it. An area I grew up because I had less school. That was a big part of arcades kind of getting a bit of a revival and booming back up. And I was travelling around the UK a lot of the time because I was working in a factory doing machine work. Not actually machine work, I was doing the coding for it, for machinery. And Cobalt, I think I wrote that in. Cobalt software, bloody hell, yeah. So that was one of my first big jobs in terms of leaving school and getting into an apprenticeship. But I used to travel around a lot and play arcades, and I played Mortal Kombat in a lot of arcades, up and down the country, from London, Manchester, Liverpool, Preston. I was anywhere I could where I was an arcade, I'd pop in. So I was big into playing Mortal Kombat at the time, and then obviously got it on the Mega Drive when it came out. And obviously all that's covered in the video and a lot more, so that's hopefully an enjoyable one. And then other content, probably jumping into content stuff. So you would have seen a lot of stuff on IGN over the past few weeks. I've covered lots of games. Gotham Knights, wow, that game. A lot to talk about in that game. I'm actually looking at something on that to try and cover it in a little bit more depth. A little bit more interesting around things and games and all that. So that's one area. Latest God of War Ragnarok, absolutely cracking game. I think everyone's going to be looking forward to that. That video's up on IGN. I've got one coming up on my channel as well for next week, so look out for that as well. Hopefully that's an enjoyable, more deep dive into the game, technical review, kind of that area. I've been playing that game quite a lot across all the hardware, so hopefully you've checked that review out. If you do want to pick this game up, I don't think you'll be sad even on PS4. I think it's an incredible title, but you would have seen my video over there anyway. But there's a lot more to discuss on that title. Had a chat with the team, which was great, getting a lot of information about what they did with the engine and why they've done it, so hopefully check that out. And then there's lots of other stuff in the pipeline, so I've got a lot of work coming up on IGN as well, a lot of things dropping, new games coming out. It's going to be busy. There's lots of games coming out at the end of this month, going into December, so some big titles to look at. Some things I'll be covering, some things I hopefully will be covering, and you can check those out as well. So over to Patron Q&A now. So the first one is from David Braithwaite, and he asks, with the release of the PS5 and Series X, we've got rather used to 60 FPS. It's really jarring to go back to 30, even if you throw in 4K or ray tracing. Do you think we'll have to say goodbye to 60 FPS as more advanced engines like UE5 are used? So again, I know this is a big fear for everyone, and I'll say the same thing I've said before here. No. It's simply a choice of the developers. Every single platform in existence, right back to the Spectrum, the Commodore 64, and even the Atari VCS, could all run 50Hz, 60Hz titles. It's whether or not you choose to use that or not, or use the options of the power in the GPU, the CPU, whatever, to do something very different. We had Xbox 360, PS3 titles, PS4, Xbox One, all running 60 FPS, and even up until the latest COD titles all run 60 FPS on PS3 and PS4, even if they don't do a great job of it. But there's definitely titles there that did. So no, what we'll see, I think, a continuation of the modes we're seeing now. I don't think ray tracing will be hugely implemented anyway on consoles. You've got the likes of Insomniac, which is just completely and utterly above everyone else at that point in terms of how they're utilising the entire PS5 to utilise the CPU, the data pooling, the GPU and that shared memory. So all of that is one of the reasons why they do so well with their ray tracing, and that will be good for things like Wolverine. But I still think they'll have a 60 FPS option, even if they have to disable ray tracing at that point and just run a 60 FPS performance mode. I think that the impact on the market at the moment has made that a big sell, and people have upgraded because of 60 FPS. They've been very interested in that. So no, I don't think it'll be the end. I don't think UE5 titles are all going to be 30, no matter what many people are saying. It's all around what the team decide to utilise it with. That said, there is an area that I'm going to cover in the future videos I've alluded to already around development, time, skills and all that kind of stuff. So we will come back to that. But no, I think we'll see bigger titles with the 30 FPS mode only. But I don't think you're going to see the end of 60 FPS. No. Hopefully that's good news. And David's killing it today, so the next question is also from David. So again, this is a good time to say, if you've got questions, please join my Patreon. If you're already a member, ping your question on there, or even down below, and I'll pick it up in the next video. But he asks, do you think we're done with resolution comparisons in the not too distant future? Like, we never talk about how many sound channels or colours on screen a console had like we did back in the day. Oh, what a great question, David. Excellent. Absolutely so true. You know, it's about the bits and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so yeah, I hope so. I do hope so. It's one of the most boring elements of any game review for me. I don't like it. I've never liked it. I've always been a big advocate. But we're now seeing, I think because the PC market, as I said before quite a while ago, a few years ago, that they're moving away from teraflops and resolutions and all that, because all that kind of area of Moore's Law's gone. So they're no longer chasing that. They're utilising, be intelligent with your pixels rather than just pushing more of them. So I think generally we'll move into a situation where all the reconstruction techniques, I mean, it's already there now, let's be honest. I might give you a resolution count for a game, or anyone else might do. It's probably not right. It's probably not right because there's many reconstruction techniques that are so effective now within a software solution over the years. COD's a good example. It's used a half width forever, and yet I constantly see everyone else talking about it runs at 3840 by 2160. It doesn't. You can see it. It breaks down all the time. Resident Evil, I pulled that out at the time when I did the review of it, Resident Evil 7. So there's definitely areas of titles that use a reconstruction technique already. So it's already almost mute. It should always be around the image quality. What does it look like? What does it run like? How does the visual quality compare? Is it blurry? Is it soft? Does it flicker? Do you have lots of artifacts? All those are bigger issues for me. The SSR in the latest Call of Duty title is horrible. It just ruins the image. It's really badly implemented, and it always has been. So yes, I think it will happen. We will get to that point. Maybe in a couple of years' time, maybe at the end of this generation, we'll have stopped arguing about that, and we'll probably be talking about who's running 120 FPS, who's got HDR, who's got faster loading. All those things will replace it. So I'll be happy that we do stop talking about resolution. I do think we'll get there at some point. I do, and in not too distant future. I just think it like it was back in the day, as you allude to. 256 colours, 4096 colours, ham mode, all of that, it will just be replaced with something else to argue about. So sorry, David, it'll probably go away, but something will take its place. And there we go, just over the 30-minute mark. Hopefully that was enjoyable. I will have something up in the next 2 weeks to discuss. I'll tell you, there's a few videos coming out on my channel and over on IGN over the next few weeks, so just stay peeled to them. But they'll probably be a bit busier in December when I've got a little bit more time on my hands. Hopefully this was enjoyable. It had some good information for you and it wasn't too boring. Anyway, you guys and girls take care, and I'll catch you on the next one.
It took just 24 hours for us to lose control of the city. Tonight, Gotham's relying on one man to save us all.